Alright. Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to give my quick review of 9.2 Shadowlands Eternity's End and the developer preview we've seen so far. So, quick thing to note is that there's a lot of different content spread out all over the place. We're going to kind of like flip through a bunch of different tabs here as we do it. But first, it started with the video, and we were expecting a little bit more with this, as this was like the big hyped up thing, the big hyped up event. It was going to show off all the new content, all the new information, and they have some pretty cool things like mounts. There's like a cool snail mount. They even talk about how there's going to be like flying spiders as well that are going to be coming around the corner, revamped professions, conduits, a lot of these other things. One little cool highlight I like is that they're adding some more content that's going to come into the Darkmoon Fair, which is something we talked about in our last video, but they didn't actually add any extra sort of rewards to it. So it's cool having like extra games, but they really need to start working some more on adding certain like spell animations as better rewards so we can kind of go back and do that old content. But to the real meat and potatoes of the new patch, there are going to be tier sets returning from left to right. We have Shaman, Rogue, Monk, DK, Priest, and Druid. Yeah, DK, Priest, Druid. Followed up by the next 6, which is going to be Hunter, Warrior, Demon Hunter, Mage, Warlock, Paladin. So Mage, Warlock, Paladin right there for you. So huzzah, they're kind of bringing back the tier sets, but there's going to be a bit of a twist that's going to come around to it because you are going to be able to earn these tier sets from raids, as usual, but you also get them from PvP and Mythic Dungeons. But the weird thing about it is they said you're not getting them from Conquest or you're not getting them from the end of dungeon chest, but you could kind of get them from the vault. So whatever that means. I don't know if that's going to be like the first unlock, or I don't know if that's going to mean like you have a random chance to be able to get those items, but it's somewhat going to be there. They said it's supposed to act as some bad luck protection that's going to be coming your way. So huzzah. There's also been a couple interviews. There is one with a Malaysian website with Morgan Day and Dan User. And then there's Millennium, which is a French website where Ian and Sarah Wands had an interview as well. So we're going to go through a couple different things happening right there. Before we dive too hard into it, Ian's interview with Millennium, though, goes into, hey, you're going to have 2 legendaries, but you can only have your Covenant legendary and 1 other Lego available. So for certain classes, that's going to be absolutely fucking nuts. Mistweavers get to have, like, Sinister Teachings and Ancient Teachings of the Monastery. Boomies are probably going to be insane, knowing Boomies, right? Paladins getting the Ashen Hollow legendary, I guess, would be pretty neat. So, yeah, there's going to be the Covenant legendaries, but I think for some classes it'll be really weird. I mean, like Disc, for example, you'll get a full minute of cooldown reduction out of your Boon of the Ascended, and then maybe there'll be some fights where Mykonos' cooldown reduction will allow you to have a minute and 30 boon, but other fights that may not happen at all. We're going to kind of have to see there. Keep in mind, there are also updates to our Conduit trees and our Soulbind trees, so maybe that could be enough of a catalyst to help out the spec. We'll see. But some of them are going to be really nice. I mean, I know for Holy Priest, we're kind of locked into flash concentration all the time. So the flavor of the Covenant abilities could actually be pretty sick as well. Being able to have like ridiculous cooldown reduction for your Divine Hymn out of the Night Fae Lego, or just being able to have constant extra damage when you're in keys with like the Kyrian Lego. That could be really, really nice. The new zone is going to be Zereth Mortis, as we talked about before, and it will be the Sepulchre, which will be the final raid. It's going to have 11 bosses, but the first bit of the raid is going to be time-gated. We love that word, right? And so you face 8 bosses with Anduin as the end of that 8th boss. It'll be the 8th boss in the raid. So on normal and heroic, on the very first week, you can only kill 8 out of the 11 bosses. And then next week, when Mythic unlocks, and the first week of LFR unlocks, that's when you'll be able to kill the later 3 bosses after Anduin, so presumably going to be the Jailer, who's out here looking all beastly and tough and has some anima or azurite behind him or something like that as he's in the Sepulchre, right? So the zone is going to be this pretty neat sort of alien vibe to it, where we're at like basically where creation began. There's going to be like an arid, deserty zone, and then there's going to be a lush zone with nice little cute progenitors, and you actually get some of these squid mounts and stuff like that. And you're going to run around and do your questing, and you're also going to fight off some of the Maw Jailer people. But the trick is, there is going to be a new grind, as always, and that grind is going to involve basically Duolingo. You have to learn how these nice little cute automatas actually speak, because they speak in runes and hexagons and shapes and stuff like that. So you have to be able to find out how to actually talk to them. And so this is also going to be how you unlock legendary upgrades. You're not going to be doing Torghast anymore to get your upgrades for your legendaries. They're going to be from this new zone and the Cypher research. The Cypher research is also going to allow you to fly in the zone. So no flying in the beginning, but later on you will as you go through that storyline, right? So lots to be able to take in and everything there. And as we talk about the story and everything for Anduin and everything like that, there is the narrative reason, as they're talking about, for how you're going to tackle the raid. It's undeniable that this will slow down progression, particularly within the World First races. It'll be interesting to see how those players adapt to the change, since we haven't had winged locked raid releases since Icecrown Citadel. Yeah. The implication: the final 3 bosses will unlock in the second week, though presumably Anduin will need to actually be defeated in order to face them, rather than a simple time gate. So I wonder if there'll be some kind of skip in the future as well. Right? After a certain period of time, the next raid will open, and will it be implemented in a way that will ultimately confront the guard. The first week offers an important part of the story where you can even deal with Anduin and fend off the guard's domination. It was intentionally set for a natural story development. After that, the region will open in time for the opening of Mythic difficulty. Incidentally, the guard is the last boss of the burial site of the original Being raid. If the guard is finally defeated, the final curtain of the Shadowlands story will come to an end. So, we're going to fight the jailer, but first we have a little bit of like time gating that happens to it, right? And they do specifically talk about how we're supposed to rescue Anduin, and there's actually a kind of neat area in the video where Anduin also does his super slick pose, his Arthas pose, you can see right here, as he's going to be going in and doing the freaking whoop from the original Northrend cinematic and everything. So maybe we're going to beat the Arthas out of Anduin or something like that. There have been some allusions to all the souls and everything that the jailer has like locked up. There's specific areas in Torghast, I think, where you're able to like see those lost souls that are all trapped and everything like that, where they specifically reference Arthas and Sylvanas and everything like that. So, hey, that's kind of cool, but that really wasn't actually laid out in too much depth. Diving a little bit into the Ian interview, there's a lot of dodging in this interview, and I'll link it in the description below and everything. But some of the big things is specifically talking about Zereth Mortis and the grind that's ahead of us, okay? So they ask, from a gameplay-oriented perspective, with a new language, these fractals work in a similar way to Korthia's catalog research. Whew. And so he says a little. Narratively, as players explore, they will get to know the Atamas, their culture and mysteries. You'll decipher their language and begin to understand things that were previously incomprehensible or shaped like runes. So it seems like there's going to be a lot of like big story implications that these Atamas are going to relate to us, but we won't really know what's going on really until we understand the language. If you guys ever played Final Fantasy X, it's going to be a little bit similar to learning the other languages in that game, where they kind of give some references to Sin and, you know, the world building in that game, right? And I think that there's quite a bit of reference to Final Fantasy X in this, where it seems like you have to learn like tone, body language, inflection to kind of infer what's happening. And then later on, once you probably cleared through the raid, you might find out that all these Atamas are warning you maybe about a boss mechanic or warning you about a monster that you might fight in the raid. Something like that, I think, is really, really likely. So, but yeah, they're saying replacing anything that's ever been seen with something literally alien. And as you explore the area and uncover new secrets, you'll also learn more about the places you came from, thanks to a better understanding of this language, and your inability to decipher it will fade. So, potentially more references and everything like that, they're going to be coming around to the future of 10.0, because if I didn't mention it already, 9.2 is going to be the culmination of the story, and in a sort of weird way, they're like, hey, this was always the plan, huzzah! Yeah, as usual, right? But Zereth Mortis farmed to be more friendly. As always, you should know that the feedback that we have, which allowed the introduction of 9.15, did not only lead to the creation of 9.15, but also all subsequent updates. And I know I've been going rapid fire through this, but this is so important, okay? Every expansion, we've kind of gotten bogged down in this sort of okay, well, the game's kind of fun when you only play one character, but I really want to start playing other things. But the grind and the barrier to entry is just super high. I don't want to do the Covenant storylines again. I don't want to have to grind Renown again. And now they're saying that they're listening and changing their philosophy. So the number one thing I'm looking for out of this 9.2 patch is it actually going to be alt-friendly? Is it actually going to be welcoming enough, whatever you want to call it, for our alts to be able to start re-rolling if we needed to be able to start developing alts earlier than these 0.5 patches? I really hope that they are legit about it, right? They said there's new stories and quests as well as new ways to progress, but we've learned a lot from Korthia and in creating these loops. Some of the realizations had to do with forced power that came through improving intermediates and adding hunts that frustrated players. But that's not all, since other realizations have taken place about the secondary characters in particular. So narratively, we brought a lighter touch in Zareth Mortis than Korthia. We want players to explore and unlock access to shards of content in a freer way, as opposed to the linear path that has to be taken for progression in Korthia. Which is a little bit weird, because Korthia, like, once you got past the story, and once you got past those, like, tier 4 one-off quests, it was really just go explore and go get quests and rares. So I am a little curious as to what they have in store. Maybe some more puzzle games, similar to what we had in Azshtar, might be more fun. Jumping puzzles, maybe. Might be kind of interesting, since this seems to be a little bit more open and airy than Korthia was. Korthia felt pretty stuffy. And they were saying that this zone is going to be on par with Azshtar in its size. So that could be pretty hype as well. Right? But yeah, of course, during testing phase, collect feedback, all that other great stuff, right? They don't have any rollout date for PTR just yet. They don't have any announcement date coming out yet. They talk a little bit about some of the challenges. Flight, as we mentioned before, is going to come from the decryption system, and I believe it's going to be account-wide as well. The other thing is you get your 2 legendaries unlocked, that you can wear the second legendary based off of your Zareth Mortis reputation or decryption unlocks and everything like that. Once again, there's just more talk about, hey, we're not doing global release. They explain some of the reasons why, but it's kind of the stuff you've already heard of. One of the other questions that they had, and this is a bit of a sidetrack, is they talk about unlocking the story by reading the books. And they say, hey, these elements aren't crucial to understanding the events taking place in game. So Ian sort of defends, hey, you don't need to, read these books to understand the story. And he says, if you ever need to read a book outside the game to understand a major quest or plot in game that is World of Warcraft, then that would mean that we would have caused significant narrative disruption. And this honestly frustrates me, because I feel like whenever I have a take about, okay, it's like this, wow, it's kind of weird that Sylvanas is so powerful so quickly, or, I feel like we don't really understand anything about the Jailer. It's like the lore people come out of the woodwork and they're like, well, you didn't read the story, you don't understand this. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course, because I didn't read the story. So I don't really like that they're defending that. They talk even about Cairn dying and not seeing that event on screen and the players being informed directly. If you didn't read the books, you never would have learned what had happened. And then they defend that and they say, oh yeah, that's fine. That's not narrative disruption. But I really think that it is. So it drives me crazy. I'm like, I'm somebody who has like a passing interest in lore, but it's very odd when I try to like opine on lore specific things, but I'm not given all the information from the game itself when I have to go outside the game in order to figure it out. I don't know why they wouldn't just add a library in game or add more cutscenes that we sort of play out. I don't really get it. I'm not a fan of that. They didn't have any updates, some more mysteries to solve on Kil'jaeden and the Lich King and everything like that. No updates on the Thanos, big old we'll see. When it comes to Season 3's M+ affix, they said, we're still reflecting on how this will actually work, which is kind of a big red flag to me, because it seems like they don't have a complete plan just yet. They're just exploring several avenues and trying them out. But I think more of like how Tormented worked, it seemed just rushed. And it seemed by the time that it went on PTR, we didn't really have any opportunity to change how the affix would work. It said, hey, here's the powers. We didn't really get any changes to the powers. We got some tuning to it, but that was about it. So I hope it's not another Tormented. I hope it's something that's going to have a lot more longevity to it. I like the idea of, like freeing some of the souls from domination magic. They say the Jailer and the domination are going to be big themes to it. So I hope it's not just kill some of his lieutenants. I hope it's not 20% breakpoints. I hope it's some kind of extra powers that we can get, even if they're like one-time dealers or something like that. Would be kind of neat. But we'll see. Of course, they talked about how, you know, they're bringing back tier sets and everything. And actually, in the Morgan Day interview, they actually specifically are asked about tier sets in the past. And Morgan Day says that they've been something they wanted to revisit since 2 BlizzCons ago, which baffles me because we were like begging for tier sets 2 BlizzCons ago. That was in the middle of BFA, right? And so Ian kind of further elaborates on this. They love the idea of working on the return. We took a break after creating them for several years because they didn't like how they worked with Azerite armor. But God, I guarantee everybody would love to be able to have tier sets instead of Azerite armor. Like, ugh. The other thing is they didn't like how they wanted to just make it about class fantasy and have the 20th version of a paladin set or a priest popat. And like, sure, I kind of get that. But then they are like, wow, we figured out how to merge class fantasy and raid fantasy together into the set bonuses that we see now. And I'm like, come on. That couldn't have been like the first time. That couldn't have been the first time. So that stuff's pretty frustrating to read about, honestly. As like that is the reason that they wanted to get rid of it. They're saying, hey, we wanted to do it for 2 or 3 years ago when everyone was begging for it. And now they're going to bring it back. I'm glad that they're adding PvP and M+ to allow you to get those tier set bonuses more easily filled out, because I am really worried without any Master Looter about actually filling out everybody's sets at the same time. So we'll see. We'll see about that. More updates. No new levels of Renown. All your additional unlocks are going to be from Zereth Mortis, so that's going to be fun. They are also going to be adding a solo queue for PvPers, but it's a bit of a brawl system. It's a bit of a beta system. Basically, they're going to put everybody together in this thing called Solo Shuffle, and you line up along with a few other players and join a very serious 2v2. So they have something called Lone Melee, and then they have something called Solo Shuffle. And the Solo Shuffle is actually a footnote at the end of the Morgan Day interview, where they talk about taking 6 players, throw them in a pool, and have them fight in 3v3s in every possible combination you could form, and the one with the best rating at the end wins. And so that's their idea of how they would do solo queue, rather than teaching the computer to put together specific comps or correct comps. So, hey, there's kind of a beta system out there for the PvP players. So I'm hoping that's going to be good. They also further build up on the catch-up mechanics for Zereth Mortis, okay? And so they say, are there going to be catch-up mechanics for the farm? And so once again, Ian talks about how this is the philosophy proposed in 915. We want to offer fun, interesting, deep progression during the first weeks while allowing a player arriving late or changing characters not to have the feeling of being late, precisely in order to avoid this being a system of frustration. So to me, that kind of seems like it'll be more along the lines of like Valor, where you have a weekly sort of cap that you're able to get for the research from Zereth Mortis, and then people catching up can just accelerate through that, I hope. But I'm glad that they're asking themselves, finally, how could this be expected in a few months? How can we add catch-up mechanics? How can we help the secondary characters? And different answers exist depending on the nature. But ideally, we should not have to fix this one, like they had to fix Korthia. I hope they really stick to it, and this is something we've heard time and time again about making things more friendly. I really hope it's different this time. This would be the number one thing that I would like beg people to call out and talk to Blizzard about, because this is going to affect the future of every grind. There's always going to be a grind. Like I said in my previous video, I'm fine with some time gating to it, but this needs to be the number one thing. Overall, I'm a bit split when it comes to this patch. I think there's some interesting things. I like the look of Zereth Mortis. I like some of the ideas that they have for how they want to change the grind, and I like the idea of how they want to like kind of revamp the zones and revamp some of the grind and catch up and everything for alts. The story has been okay, but there's definitely just been some big gaps, I think, that are probably going to be filled in by the books like it seems like it always happens, which is also frustrating. But I'm hopeful. I really disliked having all the information coming from just a million different areas, where we're looking at Malaysian newspaper interviews and a French website, and then, of course, the video here. It seems like they just spread all the information out to the four winds for Wowhead and all of us to put together. So, not the biggest fan of that. I'll leave the links in the description below as well if you guys want to check it all out. But I do wish they would have kind of coalesced some stuff. But let me know if you guys are excited for 9.2, what you're excited about. Personally, I really want to see a lot more, and I think class balance is going to be extremely challenging for them to continue adding. But we'll see what's going to happen, all right? Thanks for tuning in, guys. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch you all next time. Woo!